based on the science, sustained giving is actually a stronger psychological hold on donor behavior because it reinforces the habit much more consistently, much more deeply than does, for example, a major gift.
It took a powerful experience to make a pretty big commitment, but that has also stuck over time. And then that very stickiness is what has helped shape the identity for our family. Cherian Koshy, welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast.
Dave, thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, man. This is so fun, by the way, for me to get to turn the tables on a fellow author. As we record this, your book is just about to come out. By the time our listeners see this, they are going to be able to find Neurogiving, the Science of Donor Decision-Making. And one, I'm super excited for you.
No, thank you. And I appreciate all of your help. I mean, I remember when your book was coming out and we talked about it, and you've been giving me some advice, and I've been trying to take that to heart as much as I can. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're killing it. I'm super excited. I think it's going to take the sector by storm. And I know exactly how you feel right now in the midst of them. What did I just say in the last podcast? So, but I love shining a light, especially on air. When we can learn from other sectors, and we'll talk a little bit about your background, and obviously you've got a rich nonprofit background, but can we bring in other disciplines, other ways of understanding better the work that we do? And I feel like you and I haven't had a ton of time together, but that's something that I've always appreciated about you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and we have spent a little bit of time together, but I'm looking forward to spending even more time together, and definitely, I think you owe me like a meal, right? And
I totally owe you a meal. Yeah. You gave me some really good advice. We'll put it on air at some point when that advice comes out. But I love that.
It's great.
All right, so let's start with your story though, because obviously we'll get to the book. But just what are some of the experiences, maybe frustrations even, or patterns that that you kept seeing in your story that pushed you into this kind of behavioral science side of fundraising?
So it actually truly was frustration. And so I've been in the fundraising nonprofit sector for almost 30 years. And I fell backwards into fundraising. And I did a lot of stuff by trial and error when I first got started. And then I started learning, and I got a mentor, and I got the CFRE and all of the things that you're supposed to do, right? But I would do a thing that you were supposed to do, like the best practice that people told you to do. And then sometimes it would work. And then I got really excited. I'm like, oh yeah, that worked. That was great. Like we raised some money. And then I would do the thing again and it wouldn't work. I'm like, wait, why? But I did the thing and it worked. Why wouldn't it work again? And much to the chagrin of many of my colleagues, I would get deep into my head around why didn't that work? It should work. And so I tried to unpack why it wasn't working. Did I do something wrong? Was it a segmentation problem? Was it a copy problem? Was it, why wasn't that working? And there weren't really good answers. And I was seeing like other good organizations struggling with this problem that they really couldn't name, but there was definitely a problem of essentially diminishing returns. Like we're doing the same thing, but not getting the same results. And so I started researching. I started trying to figure this out. I went to conferences and I read books inside of the sector, and I talked to other fundraisers, and I started learning some things, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. And I put some pieces together, and I did some workshops, and I like the workshops that I learned from. And then I started doing some of my own workshops, teaching other people what I was learning and presenting my findings. But then what I discovered was, we could learn from some other sectors or some other things. That rabbit hole led me down into some behavioral science paths because there was some overlap. And I was like, oh, so then I took some other courses in those spaces, and I was collecting all of this research and then presenting those back to folks. And I was like, this is really interesting. And I, in any workshop, webinar, keynote that I do, I always try to cite my sources so that people could find stuff. And over the course of multiple years, there would be times where people would say, hey, you presented this and there was that research. Where was that? Where can I get that? And I'd have to dig it out from a slide somewhere.
Mm.
And that's what the genesis of Neurogiving was. It was like, how can I take all of the research, all of the findings, and put it in one place so that people who came after me could find all of that research and have it in one place so that they could see the path, see the genesis of the research and the discussion, and follow the process to kind of where it leads. And they may come to a different kind of decision, a different understanding of it, but at least they could see where the research is, where it has been inside of the sector and outside of the sector. So, I mean, you've seen a copy. There's like 25 pages of source citations, and it's designed for that purpose. So if you're new to the sector, you get a jump start on where that research is, and you can kind of scan and be like, oh, I'm going to go find this piece of research and where that's cited in the book, and I can like go find out what that means. If you're not new to the sector, if you've been around for a while, you can take the book and hand it to your CEO or your board member and be like, see, I'm right. This is what the reason.
That's what this whole book is. Just
yeah, exactly, like a thump factor of him and saying like, I'm doing it right, and not what Cherian says is right, but here's what the actual academic peer-reviewed studies say is the right thing to do, bringing to bear the neuroscience, the behavioral science, the donor psychology together, that says this is the way that generosity actually works, and more importantly, how it breaks if we do it the wrong way. So stop messing with the stuff that I know is right.
Man, so much there. And not only is there great bibliography, but I just learned an index. This is like such a 20th century thing that I didn't even think to look for, but now I'm going to like go dig through. No, I think that the topic of, obviously, and I love the term, by the way, neurogiving, but it just digs into one of the most fascinating questions, I think, in the fundraising sector, which is we talk a lot about what to do and sort of what the right techniques and strategies are, but we don't talk a lot about why do donors move from considering a donation to actually donating. And the fact that you took the time to actually coalesce this research and put it together in one place is a gift in the industry.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, it was as much for myself as it was for, anybody else to just be able to say, where is this piece? And there's lots of great people inside of our sector that are doing work on donor psychology. The probably the most preeminent people that I trust the most are Jen Chang and Adrian Sargent, right? Doing incredible work there. And they have a ton of stuff to say. There are other people as well. And putting all of that in one place, but putting the kind of storyline of all of that research, putting it in context of the outside of the sector research, and then having it in a way that you can just kind of map that and connect the dots between what's happening outside, inside, and all of the different pieces, so that you can say, oh, I get a sense of what this is. And I want to be super clear. It's not what I think donor psychology is or what the outcome should be in terms of this is precisely pro forma what you should do in your shop. You have all of the donor psychology, all of the neuroscience, all of the behavioral science in this book, and then it gives you the ability to test things, to try out different things, because you have the ability to take the work and see how you can build the conditions inside of your organization where generosity can flourish, not that there's a prescribed outcome.
Yeah. Giving people the tools, but not the here's your precise blueprint, because there is an element of we have to create that. Well, let's talk about one of the things I'm really interested in when it comes to the why question. And I've been digging. This is something I'm just fascinated to geek out with you on, into the question of why do people give on a sustainable, recurring basis? But I just think there's something that's really interesting around, and we'll come back to that, but the differences between what donors say, and then what they actually do. And so, I think you've written about, the gap between donors' stated intentions and their actual behavior. How did you explore that in the research?
So this is one thing that I think every person in your audience will kind of intuitively understand. One of the first lessons we learn is that donors lie, but not intentionally. They don't lie intentionally. They don't lie out of malice. They lie because their conscious brain explains behavior that the emotional brain has already decided. So when donors say, I give because of impact, they mean it, but the behavioral data tells a much more complex story. They're giving because of identity, because of affinity, because of a story that they've already told themselves, because of some sense of urgency, but not because of organizational urgency, something else that's happening, because of empathy or social proof and bias. And then after that, they rationalize all of that because of something that we call impact. So this is specifically relevant to your audience around sustainable giving systems, because if we built strategies around what donors literally say, we would optimize for accuracy. And that's so, there's a concept called active listening, right? Where, on one level, we hear what donors literally say and or what our audience literally says, whoever we're listening to. Martha Schumacher does some really great work on this. And if you're listening at that base level, you'll hear the words that are being said, but there's there's additional levels, but I'm simplifying here. There's a level behind that when you're thinking about what's not being said, the elements behind that, you actually get to a deeper understanding of the question behind the question or the statement behind the question. And if we build for what donors actually do, we optimize for repeatability. And sustainability always comes from repeatability. So I want, and this is not like my personal kind of feeling, it's what the science says. The thing that you have to remember for everyone, all of us, is that everyone's brain functions like a cell phone on 1% battery all the time. And our brains are trying to, it's not that the brain doesn't care, that they don't love your cause, but it's trying to minimize how many things it's doing because it can run out of that energy. And so it's trying to figure out, how can I quickly read that text message, kind of literally, right? So what are the ways that it can conserve that energy and do the thing that it needs to do most optimally? And as a result, it may have this stated intention of, oh yeah, I want to do that thing. But when it comes down to it, they don't actually do the thing for any number of reasons. Not because they dislike you, not because out of malice, but because there's so many other things that come into play. And, there's lots of ways that we can unpack that. And like in keynotes and workshops, I do some fun ways of unpacking that. But the point that I think every person, every organization needs to understand is that when you understand that piece and you start thinking about more than what the donor has literally said to you and start thinking about the behavioral aspect and you start optimizing for those pieces, it changes how you look at the work that you do.
Yeah, that's, as I think about what we can apply, one of the other areas that comes to mind is just this concept of identity, trust, and then in thinking about that in the long term, because part of sustainability is long-term giving. So you actually have I'm going to read you a quote from your own book for our listeners. So this is from chapter 4 on appropriately
I love that
named,
chapter.
It's a great chapter. Appropriately named identity, trust, and long-term giving. And the quote is this: consistency builds trust in the brain. Trust isn't built in a day. It's built through consistent experiences over time. Each time a donor has a positive experience that aligns with their expectations, the neural pathways associated with trust get a little bit stronger. The larger the commitment or gift, the larger the trust must be. And then in a paragraph or two later, you said, building trust in the organization is a critical task that takes time and cannot be taken lightly. Our brains are pattern recognition machines. If a nonprofit consistently follows through on promises such as delivering aid as advertised, communicating regularly, using donations wisely, the donor's brain gradually shifts into a state of relaxed confidence. Over repeated interactions, and this is key, the act of trusting becomes less of a conscious decision and more of an automatic response because the brain has learned, quote, this organization comes through. So consistency builds trust on a neurological level. Talk about that.
So I think that all of us know this intuitively. So I love that you brought this out because I actually talk about this quite a lot in talks that I give. So from a neuroscience perspective, this is a process called myelination, where the neurons actually get stronger. And I love geeking out about this because you can actually watch the process in the brain where the neuron gets bigger, if you will. That's a really simple way of explaining it. But think about like learning to ride a bike, right? The first time you do it, when I was teaching my kids to ride a bike, they fall down a lot. They just can't figure it out. And then you put a kid that, after a few times, they get it. And then you can't get them off the bike, right? Like and it's something that they can't forget to a certain extent, right? But in your personal life, you have trusted relationships with people. And those people are people who show up very consistently in your life, who share things with you and you share things with them, that are vulnerable, and they make these repeated gestures with you regularly. That's the key. And what I think is worrisome in our sector is that people think that you can create essentially a grand gesture of trust somehow and bypass trust very quickly, move them through the pipeline and close a big gift, because we can essentially broker trust through a person or through an activity, and that we can eliminate that time. And it's absolutely false. The study that's quoted, I think it's in that chapter, but I apologize if I'm wrong. It's somewhere in the book. Is that the test that they did is they take two people and they play a game where people essentially deposit they exchange things between the two people repeatedly over and over again. And what they found is that at any point, the person feels like, especially early on, they feel like the risk of the other person not reciprocating is very, very high at the beginning. And over time, it essentially evens out. We see that in organizations all the time, but with donors, right? When people, I don't want to overclaim this, but I think this has a lot to do with retention rates. That people don't know where their dollars are going. They don't know what's happening with the dollars. They don't know what's going to happen. And because of that uncertainty, they don't know what you said. They don't know if you'll follow up when that matters. They don't know if you'll communicate, if there's alignment there. And that's basically the donor brain moving away from uncertainty. And people move away from things that they're worried about and towards things that they are certain about. And people's brains say, I see a pattern. It's safe to stay connected to these people or to these things. And at a certain point, there is so much trust with a person, in your personal life or with an organization, that the trust becomes something that you adopt for yourself, and you become a proxy for that cause, essentially. So what I mean by that is, this is ultimately the goal of a consistency trust relationship, is that they become the trusted agent, essentially saying like, I'm the responsible party for carrying this trust. And I think that, a lot of organizations have a donor like this where they say, this organization, this cause is my responsibility. So no matter what happens to the economy or to, my own personal situation, I'm going to find a way to give. I'll figure it out because I know how important this is. So I think that's the core theme of sustainable giving. It's not an appeal tactic. It's a trust building engine. And this piece isn't in that section of the book, but the psychological value of sustained giving is that when you do that activity over and over again, you are also teaching yourself what you care about. You are telling yourself this is something that's important to me. Therefore, it's a concept called cognitive dissonance. If I don't do that thing again and again, and after you do it several times, then it's a pattern interrupt that your brain can't handle. If it's important to you, you have to figure out a way to do that. It's sort of like drinking coffee in the morning. If I don't you feel weird or different or something's off if you don't drink coffee in the morning.
I've violated,
brush your teeth.
You don't think about it consciously, but you've kind of violated who you are. Like, no, I'm the person who runs every morning, or I'm the person who I am more of the coffee every morning type. But so I want to give you an example, and just check me on this if this isn't a example of where you talked about how the donor actually can become a vessel for trust in the recurring giving space. So one of the organizations I worked with a number of years ago is an organization called Compassion International. A lot of folks will have heard of Compassion.
I used to be a donor. Yep.
Yeah. And one of the programs that we actually worked on was a program called Compassion Sunday. Are you familiar with Compassion Sunday?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And so for our listeners, Compassion Sunday is where Compassion would go to its existing monthly donors, its existing sponsors, and say, hey, you clearly care about this topic. Would you consider hosting a Compassion Sunday? And they would typically do that at their church, their place of worship. And so, we were a part of kind of helping recruit and create the strategy and all that kind of stuff, to the tune of, I want to say a couple thousand churches participating at any given time in a Compassion Sunday. And here's the piece I'm curious as to your thoughts on. It was really the donor, the sponsor who you sat next to in the pew, so to speak, who is now up there saying like, hey, let me tell you about this organization called Compassion, and I've sponsored so-and-so for such and such a period of time, and I'll have a table in the back, after the gathering if you want to talk. Is that an example of where a donor and their identity then becomes kind of I think you were trying to say there's no shortcuts, but it's a sort of a shortcut, I suppose, to trust, because it's like, well, I trust them, therefore.
Well, I see what you're saying.
I trust Joe. I know Joe, and he's clearly excited about this. He's standing in front of the worship service.
Yeah. I wasn't sure what you meant by shortcut. So it's it's sort of an organizational shortcut to the next person, and by that, yes, I would agree with that. But you can't. So if Joe is the person who's going to do that, you have to build a lot of trust with Joe to get Joe up in front of a bunch of people and talk about Joe's experience with the organization, so that Joe is standing up there in a very vulnerable space of essentially telling people, I give to this organization and I'm encouraging you to do the same. This is the point of, I am the proxy trust, right? I'm the one who's saying, you can count on this organization because I'm vouching for them. That's a huge level of trust, but it is, in this example and in several other examples, that's the psychological value. And let me also be clear, it's the other point that I was making. Joe ain't going to stop giving to Compassion International anytime soon, because Joe has now publicly professed his giving very significantly. Joe can't walk away from Compassion by doing that. So even if Joe does not get another donor out of that church body, what compassion has successfully achieved is a potential lifetime value increase as well as a potential major donor. That's the key that most people forget about, because their metric is, how can I get acquisition out of that? That's cute, that's helpful, but that should not be the only value that they're looking at. And we sort of missed stuff because we're looking at the immediate reward that the organization gets out of stuff, and we lose track of the psychological value when people are rehearsing their I wanted to say like valuation of the organization, but their love of the organization. You can't get up in front of a group of people, a small group, a large group, your family, it doesn't matter. You can't recite the love of an organization without reinforcing that identity to yourself. That's the incredible value. And if you're seeing that on a bank statement, if you're seeing that coming out of your credit card every month, you have to, in that moment, make the identity choice. This is a value that I care about. This is an identity that I care about, or it's not. And every time the donor says, I'm going to continue making that gift, they are in fact stating that pattern to themselves. It's safe to stay connected. And you have built that trust once more with them. So I know that some organizations would say like, oh, we don't have a lot of monthly donors. We shouldn't necessarily spend a lot of time with investing in sustainable giving. I think that's a big mistake, because this is the place where incremental trust pays a long-term dividend that you don't see because you aren't watching the brain of the donor. You don't see those things because it doesn't show up until much, much longer. You're not in the room when a mom says to a kid, yeah, but we're sponsoring this kid, and it really makes a difference. That's why we keep doing this every month. You don't see that picture or that note on the fridge. Those are the things that make the difference.
Are you tired of living appeal to appeal, chasing one-time gifts? Or are you looking for ways to make your mission more sustainable? I want to introduce you to the Sustainable Giving Accelerator, which is our flagship program to grow recurring giving. Over just the past 3 years, we've collectively raised an additional $41 million in sustainable recurring giving, and this is just the beginning. Our accelerator is the proven process that we built to help you create predictable monthly revenue, free your team from constant fundraising, firefighting, and focus on the work you are made to do. We found this level of programming is best suited for organizations that are ready for scale and are willing to work to see significant growth. Through our accelerator program, we're going to help you identify hidden recurring revenue within your donor base, spot the biggest opportunities for growth, and map and execute your next moves to grow monthly giving. So if you have at least 1,000 sustaining donors and are ready to grow, or you're just ready to invest and want to scale sustainable impact, let's talk. You can apply for a free 30-minute strategy call at sustainablegiving.org/contact. Limited spots are available each month, so don't wait. Start building your sustainable giving future today. Again, that is going to sustainablegiving.org/contact to get started. So helpful. So, I mean, in one way, part of just the piece about consistency that really stood out to me was that it seems like the actual act in our world of sustainable recurring giving isn't just a financial model, it's a trust building mechanism.
That's exactly right. That is the point that I'm trying to make with everybody in this. That's what the science says. That's what I want people to understand, is that when you read the science, you start to understand that, like, the joke that I make in keynotes all the time is the scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. No, Indiana Jones and the
Oh, you gotta get your movies right.
Raiders. Sorry, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like
It's a good one.
Yeah, they're digging in the wrong place, right? Like you're looking at the wrong metrics and measuring the wrong things. You see your monthly giving revenue, and you're like, that's not a big deal. Like, no, the science says that you're actually building incremental trust that is actually way more valuable than the dollars that are coming in that month or that year from the program that you're doing. And you won't see that return for some time, but when you do see that return, it will be gigantic.
Yeah.
It will be substantial, and it may not even be from that person. That's the thing. You may not see the long tail effect of who else they're talking to. They could be acquiring new donors for you, like in the model that you mentioned, or just in like family discussions or whatnot. We like one of the big problems in general in fundraising, but certainly in places like higher ed and hospital systems, is how do we get to Gen 2 and Gen 3 donors? You know how you get to Gen 2 and Gen 3 donors? It's by having Gen 1 donors talk about their generosity. That's the key, right? Like having the conversation, making those stories repeatable, that's the key. And habitual formation is the piece that makes the difference.
Yeah. Well, and understanding, that long-term value thing, right? That's been a common thing. But to realize, number one, it's not just the dollars we measure. It's I think that's key. And I think the beauty of today is that we are seeing both the short-term returns and the long-term impacts, which I think is what's made sustainable giving more palatable for orgs, because it's not just, I remember, Cherian, you'll love this, on planned giving. I was very early in my career, and I remember, I was in fundraising, right? And so we were raising the annual fund, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, yeah, planned giving's for somebody else, because like I don't have time, like I don't have 20 years to wait around. Like we got to get this year's budget. And I remember the first time that I learned, like, wait a second, actually, there's present value, like, current giving from donors when they choose to make a planned gift actually goes up, right? And I remember that just being mind blowing, and then also realizing, actually, in the short term, there are benefits as well as in the long term. So I love that we're seeing that, in terms of consistency.
That's actually an interesting psychological phenomenon. I don't remember if I put that in the book because my editors made me cut a bunch of stuff out. I had like
you're talking
housing words. Yeah, and I had to cut a bunch of stuff out. But so it's actually the sunk cost fallacy. So when you put an organization in your will, it's the same principle that I just mentioned. Like you have spoken out loud, essentially, you've written down your generosity legacy, your ideal identity piece, and because you've made that commitment, then it would be wrong of you not to make gifts in the interim to support your identity.
Yeah, you've
told. Sorry, go ahead.
You've told your future self, or you've told. I don't know how to say it. You've told your future self who you are. So why wouldn't you be that way today?
That's precisely right. So now I have to match what I've already said. Therefore, my giving goes up now to accommodate what I've already said about myself. So the bequest intention actually drives your existing giving up.
This is making me, I don't want to say rethink, but expand thinking around. I think I wrote in my book about the importance and increasing importance of belonging and identity. But to your point, I hadn't thought about that, both the pattern of consistent giving, creating trust, but also the identity portion, specifically with regards to recurring giving programs, because those are a lot more often, they're a lot more identity driven, because it's I'm a, whether you're a quote card carrying member of or whatever the identity is, a lot of them are much more associated. You could give a gift at, the holidays to the local charity that you give every other year, occasionally. But to your point, when you went to the banquet and you signed up to become a monthly donor, like that just changes not only your identity, but your willingness to talk about it. There's just so many other impacts that I hadn't been thinking about.
Yeah. And I think for most organizations, for most people, our drive to hit an annual or fiscal year marker of revenue has shifted how we think about things. But when you start to think about your own experience, your own daily experience, right? What does habit forming look like for us? And who am I? Those types of things reveal what that would look like for a donor as well, right? And it's simple things. It's, very, very, very basic things that change how we look at the processes inside of our organization. So they're both very easy, very obvious when you look at the science and you start unpacking it. But then it's also relatively difficult to implement because we've calcified certain pieces and processes inside of our organization to look at, like, well, oh, geez, it's only a $5 a month donor. That's not that important. We should be going out and getting $10,000 donors. Don't invest in the $5 a month donor. Like, I think that's kind of short-sighted when there's so much like if it's an either or choice, that's problematic. I get that organizations need to pay bills. I get that, and I hope that it's not an either or choice. But at the same time, not investing in monthly giving, sustaining giving choices, I think is making a huge mistake for most organizations if they're able to allocate the time and resources to it, because I would say, this might get me in trouble somewhere, but I think I can stand.
Good. We'll clip this.
I think I can reasonably plant the flag here and say that based on the science, sustained giving is actually a stronger psychological, the neuroscience would say this, is a stronger psychological hold on donor behavior. I think that's true because it reinforces the habit much more consistently, much more deeply than does, for example, a major gift. Somebody might disagree with me, and I'd love to unpack that into some sort of a debate somehow. But repetition, like sequenced repetition, is the key to long-term loyalty, long-term habit formation. So I'm not way off on this one. Like, I'm not like 40.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I've told this story before on this show. But my wife 9 years ago went to a women's conference in Dallas, and it was not for a specific cause, but it was just, it was a gathering of women, and they had speakers, but they did have one organization, International Justice Mission, who had partnered with the organizers and they had one of the featured speakers was actually a woman who had come out of trafficking, who had really started to lead the global fight against trafficking. So great, powerful speaker. They had a moment on stage where they talked about the work of International Justice Mission, and they had an invitation for these women to become what they call freedom partners. Well, that moment, which was a very powerful moment and a very powerful event, one of those women in that auditorium was my wife, and stepped forward and guess who was the newest monthly donor when we got home, when she got home. And I say that partly because of your point. This was one powerful experience 9 years ago. We still, to this day, give to International Justice Mission. We have not had they're a great organization. They do great updates, but we have not had that profound moment since. But one, habits. And then two, it's become a part. I mean, I've told this story on the podcast, Cherian.
Sure.
Right. And I don't say this to brag, but I just looked the other day. A couple months ago, we actually had Tina Hudgens on the show, who was the VP of development at the time, at International Justice Mission. And our family collectively gave our 3,000th dollar to IJM just a couple of months ago. And I don't say that to brag, because we are not middle or major donors. We are $27 a month or whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah.
But when you add that up, but again, your points about how this forms identity, how the habit, what consistency does, I think all of these things compound, and you can just see where recurring sustainable giving is a piece of that puzzle. It took a powerful experience to make a pretty big commitment, but that has also stuck over time. And then that very stickiness is what has helped shape the identity for our family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that, we just found in the book that we just talked about is like, rather than have it be an either or, one of the things that you can do, which most people talk about elsewhere, is making the default on the website or the default on direct mail a monthly giving option. That doesn't mean eliminating the choice of an individual single gift, but saying that this would help most, that this is what most people do, or what if that's true, or something like that, gives people insight into how best to serve the mission, and what that accomplishes. That's an easy way of helping people to understand what sustained giving can do, and serving their existing generosity. They're at a point where they're going to make a gift, right? Like, we're not doing anything untoward. They were either going to make, in your wife's case, either a $27 one-time gift or a sustained $27.
Yeah.
She was going to make a gift in that moment. That's the point I'm making. In that moment, a dollar amount was going to happen, but it shifted from a single gift, dropping some money in that moment, to a sustained gift. And that's the difference that has now become a habit. And that has created now essentially an identity for you and your family.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I hadn't thought about it that way. Thank you for that. As you think about, well, by the way, on that defaulting kind of thing, you used a word earlier when we were, just before we started recording. Was it inertia? What was the word around the act of actually defaulting, and say the form or the ask amount to? So this was the early in the book we were talking about, page 24, as I recall.
Page 24. Yeah. I don't remember exactly what word I used, but the default is a behavioral science bias. But the status quo bias.
Oh, that's what it was. Status quo bias. It was the form is set to this, so that must be what, sort of the signal. And I don't know if you saw this earlier this year, but with the M&R benchmark study that came out, fully, I believe the percentage was around 30% of charities, when asked if they're defaulting forms currently to monthly, 30% of charities said they were. And I don't know about you. I mean, this is my day job, but I was surprised by that. Like, I was like, wow, that's a healthy number.
I think their sample size is small, though. So that might be part of it, right?
Yeah, a couple hundred charities, I think. But to your point, there is an element of tapping in, and we just did an interview with Chris Free from the Joshua Fund, and one of the things they saw in their recurring giving program, by the way, just for context, Cherian, they had 1,900 recurring donors 2 years ago. They have almost 4,000 recurring donors today.
That's amazing.
A little bit of growth. Not the only. There's many things they did when as we worked together, but one of the things that they did early on was choose to default that form very clearly. By the way, not tricking any donors. Very clearly, basically setting the tone that the biggest impact you can possibly make is to become a monthly donor. Defaulted the form, clear, obviously option to go single gift. And then when they confirm the gift, it's like, confirm my monthly gift. And then they did a thank you call to thank you for your monthly gift. So very, about as good as you can possibly do it. And it has been a huge win.
Yeah. And I mean, I would even go further to say, like, anchoring the commitment to saying, like, this is what you're doing. This is great. Normalizing that ongoing support, but then actually rewarding the identity by saying, like, as a monthly mission partner, you're someone, the language I would use is you're someone who does this. So you're reinforcing the identity on a regular basis with them. We used to do this. I used to work for an arts organization. We would use phrases like, your loyalty does this. And anybody can do this. Your generosity does this. It Because remember, when people are reading the copy, they're saying it in their head. And so they have to essentially say those words, even if they're not saying it out loud, and they hear that language in their head, thereby essentially reciting it. And like, oh, I'm a person who does this. And most people think of themselves as generous people. Most people think of themselves as loyal people. So when we say that to them, they are rehearsing that language.
Yeah.
And they have done that. So they have proven that to themselves, and they want to stay consistent with that activity. They can always choose not to. Just like you said, we're keeping this all ethical, all on the up and up. They can always say, this is not what I believe in anymore. I want to do something different. But I really would be thrilled to see what that particular organization does in the next 5 years in major gifts and planned gifts. I think it's going to be like mind-blowingly good.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. Well, it's going to be fun for me thinking now in this mindset that you've helped me with, like, even as we're working with clients, because the longest running client we've been working with has been seeing really good fruit, but we're still just a few years into that process, so that'll be fun to watch. Okay, so I got a couple other things I wanted to cover just as we are getting ready to wrap up here, but sticking on the recurring giving topic just for a minute, if you were advising a nonprofit either starting or scaling a recurring giving program, what's one behavior science principle, preferably that we haven't already talked about because we hit some good ones? What's the one behavior science principle they can use immediately?
I would say one thing that organizations tend to do is to create lots of choices for their donors, whether it's giving options or like funds that they can give to, or ways to get involved. So I've seen things like, you can volunteer, you can do gifts in kind, you can make a monthly gift, you can do would
you do one of these 7 things at year end, please?
Yes, like any of those things. And the intention is great. It's like, we want you to do any of these things. We want you to feel comfortable making the choice. The reality is, remember, 1% battery. When you give me 7 choices, my brain says, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't love you. It's not that they don't want to. But the enemy of good fundraising is not no. It's not now. And when you give me 7 choices, my answer is not no. It's, with the best of intentions, I'll get back to that when I can think through the 7 choices. And like my read later label on email, I have not seen the inside of that folder in years. In years. I cannot tell you what's in that folder. I'm frightened to look in it. These folks are well-meaning folks. They are generous folks, but you have to give them the one thing that they should do today, the one thing that would help today. And if that is a monthly gift, which it is, here's what you can do. They can always choose to fill out something else. They can make a choice to do something else. But if the most helpful thing is to do this thing, then tell them this is the thing that will help.
Well, and it feels scary, if I'm putting myself in the fundraiser shoes. Well, but that monthly ask is kind of a big ask. What if I offer them, or also you could sign up for our newsletter, right? And you're like, well, I know what they're going to do.
No, wrong. I will go out on a limb. I will tell you, do not do that. Do not ask them to be a prayer partner. Do not ask them to be a newsletter subscriber. Do not ask them to donate, cheese to your food bank, and ask them to do something else. Ask them to do one thing. Like, not even the Monty Python accounting shall be 3 and not 4. It is one thing.
One. There shall be one.
There shall be one, and it's just the one. You can ask them on a different time for, a newsletter or something like that. But the science is from Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper. It's the jam study. If you've seen this, like you give them too many choices, people look at them and they're like, I don't know what to do. Too many things. I'm going to walk on by. And then if you give them fewer choices, they actually make a decision. In the case of that's in buying decisions, and you see this all the time when you look at a website. They give you 3 decisions. Middle, better, best. Those are the options that they give you. They don't give you 500 options. They give you 3. That's why they're following the science. In the case of philanthropy, of generosity, you don't have the luxury because they don't need a cell phone. They don't need, a snow scraper.
Selling, yeah.
You just need to give them the one thing at one time. So if you need newsletter subscribers, do it later. If you're doing a monthly giving campaign, ask them for monthly giving.
Well, and you said it, like the as scary as it might seem to ask for the one thing. No, number one, the science shows that's what you should do. Number 2, send another email tomorrow. Like,
yep,
this is
100%.
This is not like a crazy either or. And one of the things that I consistently work on with clients is how do we do dedicated recruitment campaigns, inviting people into recurring giving, and there is this feeling of like, it's got to be an either or, and I'm like, number one, we should not do both and in the same email. However, you donors respond to both, and so let's make sure we include both. By the way, the enemy of fundraising is not no, it's not now. That's the quote I'm taking away from this. That's
I love
rich.
That. Love it. It's one of my favorites.
I love it. Okay. We are just getting towards the end of our time. Before we do, I have one more question for you. But before we do, I hear you have this new book that just came out that we've been talking about for about 45 minutes. Tell folks where they can find Neurogiving, where they can find you.
Oh, geez. It's anywhere you buy books, wherever your preference is, you'll find it everywhere. I hope it's available wherever you find books at your retailer of choice. There's a website called neurogivingbook.com, which has some bonuses there. If you put in your receipt information, you can get access to those things. So there's some free things there. And then my website is cheriankoshy.com. You can find out where I'm speaking. And if you want to come say hi and, debate some of these issues or tell me what you're doing, I'd love to meet you and, talk with you about these things and nerd out more.
I love that. Okay. As we conclude, I want to ask you a question that somebody asked me early on, right when the book was about to come out. And I was like,
yeah.
And it's, what do you hope fundraisers take away? So if a nonprofit leader hears this conversation, right, and they read your book, what's one thing you hope they actually do differently next week?
I think it's to do something differently next week. I think that's the takeaway. It's there's no prescribed answer on what to do, but I hope the takeaway is we should do something different than we've always done. And there's science and data that helps us understand even things like art. There's a whole discussion around the science of storytelling that you can improve and work on. And that if we continue to test, if we continue to try different things, we serve ourselves and our donors better. And our worry will always be like, are we going to, end up doing more work or burning out? I think actually, if we simplify, if we test and we simplify and try things differently, we'll end up unleashing more generosity by doing less and getting rid of the friction than by doing as much as we're doing today, because I think we're getting in the way. We're slowing generous brains down. So that's my hope.
Well said. I think that is a great place to end. Cherian, thank you for being on the show and just for absorbing, having gone through that process of writing and having had the super epic long first draft of the manuscript that you're like, well, this is going to be a thick book. I thank you, by the way, for editing it down, because I've gotten those books where you're like, I can't. Oh, man. Yeah. So thank you for pouring years and brain cells and heart beats into this material. Thank you for continuing to invest in the sector. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's such a fun conversation. Looking forward to seeing you in person too.
It's going to be fun. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope you found the information helpful and that you're able to walk away with insights that you can use to start building a steady stream of recurring revenue for your organization. For even more resources to help you build a thriving recurring giving program, go online to sustainablegiving.org. That's sustainablegiving.org. And lastly, if a leader comes to mind that you think would benefit from this episode, would you do me a favor? Would you share this episode with them? Just that little act could be the difference they need to start growing sustainable recurring giving for their own organization. Until next time, thanks for joining us.